Earlier this year, George Floyd was murdered. He was murdered in a peculiar way, in slow motion, by a person who was supposed to uphold the law, not necessarily break the law. Derek Chauvin put his knee into George Floyd's throat for nearly 9 minutes, while the world ultimately, eventually, watched. And not able to do anything, neutered in regards to action, and yet watched. Chauvin, prosecuted, yes, but the nation, especially African Americans in the nation, felt some kind of way about that. Not again, once again, here's a person of color being killed. Earlier, you had people being killed from cops shooting in the windows. You had other people. A guy that was jogging, I can't think of his name, Marbury, I believe the name, where he's jogging and random people felt empowered enough to chase him down with their truck, murder him, and with one of the family members taking a picture and putting the body on Snapchat. Yeah, people were going to feel some kind of way. And you had protests, powerful protests. And with those protests, in some cases, you had riots. Now, the riots was a tiny, tiny percentage of the protests, and yet they were there. Why wouldn't they be there, right? You have this outpouring of anger and vindictiveness that, once again, the society, the government itself, has murdered somebody who looks like you. And from the standpoint of getting anything accomplished, 99% of those cases, the cop is not prosecuted, nor does he go through any kind of, let's say, major disciplinary action from the standpoint of the law. It was as if blacks put the country on notice that there would be zero tolerance from here on out. And interestingly enough, it wasn't just blacks. You had blacks, whites, gays, straight. Sanders used to make the argument that, are you willing to fight for somebody in the way that you were willing to fight for yourself? And it just so happened, coincide at the exact same time that the George Floyd movement had kicked off. And you had people of all sorts out there, angry, bitter, pissed off, alienated from their country. Because what I would argue here is that even though it was being supplanted into this idea of human rights or civil rights, that the issues was going beyond that. You had all of these people that were being hit by COVID at the exact same time. I mean, understand the scenario to which we found ourselves. Yes, there were fires and whatnot, but you basically had a virus that erupted with a White House entirely incompetent in dealing with the virus. The virus wasn't shared equally. It wasn't like everybody dies from this equally. No, you had people of various racial groups, blacks, Hispanics, that were far more likely to die. Some of that had to do with genetic weaknesses that were brought about by poverty and by race, especially from African Americans that have this kind of unfortunate history in this country. One of strength, but definitely one of trial. The only reason we know the strength is there. But you also had people who, again, economic reasons, were more in the line of being hit by it and less likely to be able to not work because they were working in some kind of manual job that required them to be there. The people in our society that were, let's say, doing okay, continued to do okay. The higher the income, the more likely that person was able to do that job from home, or at the very least do that job in a way that they can keep going. It's the people that were already in the bottom of the economic sphere. Those companies that just got destroyed, meaning from the standpoint of retail. You realize 42% of the population before COVID was living on $18,000 a year or less. Think about that number. That's a poverty wage, but that's well below what in reality is poverty. Half of this country is in poverty or near poverty. And when COVID hit, it made it that much more acute and that much more pronounced. The people who were out there protesting, yeah, they had their masks on. Yeah, they were pissed off. Yeah, they thought the racial stuff was wrong. But I would wager to you, they also thought the idea that they are losing a job, that the government is not going to back them up, that the the work that they do, that they're not being compensated for, the house that they're not going to get the rent for, that they need to pay for the rent for, the hours that they have to sit in food banks. For that matter, knowing people and knowing that people in your society are doing that. That stuff is enough to piss people off, and that is only going to get worse. It seems that Trump is trying to, and it's not even Trump at this point, but it seems that the administration is trying to nudge the country into somewhat of an economic crisis. I mean, this is, the fight between Mnuchin and Powell. And let's be honest, it seems that there was a bit of politics being played where you have Republicans that didn't want Trump to win anyway, that was being obstinate in regards to making any changes. And you had Democrats that didn't want to take 1.8, basically $400 billion, as if this was a huge amount in a gulf between these things. Oftentimes when you want them to stand for some kind of principle, they fucking fold over like spaghetti. But on us, that one, it's principle stance. Nonsense. You knew it hurt the president for not passing more stimulus. Trump still got 10 million more votes. So the public at the very least understood he was trying to do something. I guess the point I'm trying to make here is that the people were very angry, and they had a right to be angry. But that anger went beyond just civil rights. The anger went into other items such as rent, such as food, such as not having a job. All of those things were on the boilerplate. Biden is coming in and is going to have to deal with that. And if you remember, during that time, you had Democrats painting mayors painting Black Lives Matter on the ground. It's right here in D.C. You had them taking photo ops. You had them taking their knee. They were wearing their kente cloth. And what did I say? I say Joe Biden is going to use blacks as props. That George Floyd, Jacob, all of those were going to be used as props for him to get into office and for him to point and use as a weapon against Trump. I said the media is going to focus on all of those protests, and they're going to show them, and they're going to show how angry people are. And for a while, you had this kind of movement that was taking place. But I also made the point to you that when Biden gets in office, that stuff is going to stop. That the visibility that's being shown to Black Lives Matter from a kind media that hates Donald Trump and uses this as a weapon to go against Trump, they're not going to do that for Biden, because Biden is the black president. If Biden is the black president, then who the hell are you people? You're just, an obstinate few. We're not going to show you if you're going to injure Biden. Keep in mind, Black Lives Matter started under Obama. It didn't start under Trump. You had blacks being murdered in the streets with no response from the standpoint of state under Obama that this was started. Trump, yes, it continued, but let's just be very clear. This wasn't something that started under Trump, nor is there any reasonable expectation to believe Biden is going to do anything about it. But what did Biden do? He stood there and he would make speeches in front of pictures of George Floyd and Jacob and whoever else he could get there. He would stand there with the family members or whatever. And he would say, I talked to them on the phone, meaning he would appropriate the best aspects of this that the public was beside and the public was pushing for. From the standpoint of protests that ended up in riots and so forth, I have nothing to do with it. I want to appropriate the best, not appropriate the worst. And more important, supplement this notion of things that you want to get accomplished and politically, and supplement that into identity. Meaning, Black Lives Matter had very clear political objectives that they wanted to accomplish. Defund the police, I think it was an unfortunate name for an item, but if the goal was to get people's attention, if the goal was to be provocative, it did indeed do that. You got to the point where even the president was talking about it. But what did the president-elect say? He's going to give $300 million more to the cops. Yes, he's not going to defund the police. He never appropriated that language, even though he would stand beside these items or icons for photo ops. He would use the various people for props when he needed to. But at the end of the day, do we honestly believe the guy who wrote the crime bill? Go back and listen to Joe Biden brag about using the death penalty to execute people, pushing Ronald Reagan because he wasn't executing enough people with the tools that Joe Biden himself admit that he gave. The knowing that there was a discrepancy or there was a skew in the way that the law was going to be used for people who are black versus white because of a economic gap, allowing one drug cocaine to be more, let's say, for the rich, whereas crack, same substance, for the poor. This creates this skew in our justice system where all of these people being thrown in prison for being basically poor and black. You have another situation where, even from the standpoint of the poor and black thing, these things overtly in policies that Biden pushed overtly hurt the African American community. And so even the drug laws, you must understand, Nixon started the drug war to go after blacks and hippies. Ehrlichman even admitted this, basically saying that the Nixon administration had two problems: blacks and hippies. You can't criminalize being black, you can't criminalize being a hippie, but you can go after drugs and you can attack them, get rid of their votes, and this can be the way that you hit at those communities while not directly hitting at the community. Well, the moment that you know that, and yes, I would imagine Obama was bright enough to know that, don't you have to do something? Aren't you compelled morally and ethically to say this is wrong on its face? And yet, weakness. They don't do it. Those people stay in prison. Those records, honestly, should have been expunged the moment that that information came to light and that article was put. I guess I'm making the point that Biden has been in Congress for 47 years. I've been in politics 47 years. He ain't changing. They chose Kamala Harris, a person who basically laughed about stoners being in prison, kept people in prison for longer, despite the court telling them to let those people out of prison, use prison labor, cheap prison labor for inmates, and to fight fires. I guess I'm making the point that Black Lives Matter was pushing very strong for this notion of defund the police. Under defund the police, there was all sorts of policy initiatives that were to the betterment of African Americans in those communities. How much talk did you hear of the other stuff? Or did you just hear defund the police? And how much of Biden did you hear appropriating any of the language of Black Lives Matter? How much of Biden have you heard saying anything positive about Black Lives Matter? And I mean this in a policy-oriented way, meaning the policies and ideas that Black Lives Matter is talking about that goes beyond defunding the police. Have you ever heard Biden utter those words? I've heard him go after protesters or people who he would consider to be in riots. And I've heard him basically use name drops as props. But I'm talking about from the standpoint of the real base of what Black Lives Matter was trying to accomplish and what they wanted, their policy initiatives. That's off the table. It was always off the table. Optics, theatrics, yes, they'll take the knee, they'll put on the kente cloth. But when it gets down to real world scenario, not so much. And there's one other catch to this. He's still going to get credit as if he did. Meaning, Biden has played this and media has worked with him on doing this, whether it was intentional or not, in a way that comes across as if something has been done from the standpoint of multicultural issues. And yet, nothing has been done in real terms. And yet, Biden will get this mantle as a diversity candidate, as if diversity means anything, if the individuals who are in that diverse group are not taking different points of view. And oftentimes on issues of class, they do. Meaning having a black face there is utterly irrelevant from the standpoint of class if that black face is not going to have some experience, let's say within the context of poverty, that pushes their behavior in a particular direction. But that's not what we're talking about. The policies that these people are going to be in charge of haven't been on the table. That person is black. That person is a woman. That person has a vagina. That person has a vagina and a penis. Wow. And this is basically the language and the discourse that we have in regards to people being put in various positions. The notion that identity is somehow taking the place of actual policy, especially policy that will be beneficial to those and many of the people that's in that particular identity. Class is what matters. Class is the issue. You can keep Kamala Harris. You can keep Barack Obama if that means I'm going to get Medicare for all. If that means my grandmother will be taken care of when she gets to the point of needing that extra care. When I get to that point, when my mom gets to the point. If it means that, yeah, you can keep them. Who cares? I don't need diversity for the sake of diversity. I want diversity for the sake of actually having somebody that understands the real world phenomena of the people that are, let's say, the overwhelming majority of the people that are in a particular clique. And that, if it doesn't get to the issue of class, then you ain't talking about nothing. Don't let them use identity to cover for the fact that they are failing miserably in regards to doing a job that is representing your interests. And when the issue is class, economics, the money that is in your pocket, the policies that they take that is in the interest of, let's say, an upper oligarchical class, as opposed to being in the interest of you. Those policies, like Medicare for all, or expanding Social Security, those are policies that are in the best interests of the majority of the public itself. And the American public agrees. Increasing the minimum wage. Yes, those things are in the best interest, but your constituents, from the standpoint of Democrats, are not for those things. The constituents of the Democratic Party are basically oligarchs, every bit as much as the Republican Party. Now, Democrats have found a way to cover that by using the term progressive and contorting and twisting it into just meaning identity. So the very fact of having somebody of a particular identity is in and of itself enough and go beyond any idea of class. No, the reality of it is, if you want to do something for the various communities that you talk about, the reality of it is you do something for the various communities, not posture, not theatrics of race, but actually get those policies accomplished. Expand Social Security, raise the minimum wage, get rid of student debt, make universities free from the standpoint of state institutions. This is not impossible. It is clearly there. Just don't do it. And people, especially people in the Democratic Party, don't do it because of issues of who puts money in their pocket. And honestly, who they gravitate towards more. 90% of the races are won by the side with the most cash. When you know that's true, what do? Even if you had the best of intentions. I guess a basic point is this. Joe Biden was able to use Black Lives Matter as a prop. And in using it as a prop, knowing he had no intention of appropriating any of the ideas under it, he just wanted to use it as a prop and as a way to attack Trump. The media hated Trump, so the media was going to use Black Lives Matter to do it anyway. At the end of it, however, when Joe Biden wins, they are not going to do that. And those things are going to be downplayed. Joe Biden is a black candidate, right? Then who are these other disgruntled black people? It's going to matter less. And not just matter less, he's going to get points from the media for being quote unquote progressive or quote unquote being diverse, just because he has people of various races in his administration. What that hides, however, are issues of income inequality, issues of poverty, whether they're going to do anything about the real issues in our society. And the answer, of course, is no. They entirely focus on this notion of identity. Oh, that person is a woman. That person has a penis. Interesting. Policy doesn't come up. It matters less. People are policy. Whether they're black, white, gay, straight. Are they attuned to empire? Are they attuned to the profits of oligarchs? Or are they attuned and have a track record of looking out for the interests of the American public? If you have seen Joe Biden's cabinet, it is not the latter, because you have people of different races and genders in your administration, and that somehow is this kind of multicultural, multiracial thing, and that's indicative of something. It's not indicative of anything if the experiences of those people haven't changed their mind from something other than neoliberal politics. But that's what they're there for, to give you that impression. I'm saying it's BS. At this point, people are policy. And you can see the people that Biden have been putting in that office, and it gives you a clear indication on where this administration is going. Like, share, and subscribe.